Welcome everyone to tonight's Zoom webinar. My name is Katie Ziegler. I've been a library associate here at DBRL for a little over 2 years now, and I'm proud to share our presentation on leaving digital legacies with you all tonight. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Seth Smith, who is one of our public services librarians here at DBRL. He has, among other things, specialized in personal archiving for the last 5 years and has taught many tech classes along the way. With that, we'll get started. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Katie. Thanks everybody for attending this webinar. It's a really nice evening out there, amazing for early November. As Katie mentioned, my name is Seth Smith, and I'm a public services librarian here. I've taught a lot of technology classes, as well as one of the specialties that I've brought into this library system from an archives background is our personal archiving course. So I became really interested in personal archiving it was about 6 years ago. And then we started a course in personal archiving, and really this digital legacy course has been developed from that personal archiving course. So I want to give a shout out to Katie. She's one of our wonderful library associates here. She's provided lots of great assistance with this project and presentation. So she's going to be behind the scenes running the show, answering any chat questions that you might have during this presentation. So feel free to ask questions during the presentation. That's totally fine. So we planned on offering this program in late April, and because of COVID, of course, we did have to postpone all our in-person programs, but this actually seemed like a really important program to be offering at this time. With this awful pandemic going on, I know a lot of people are thinking about their own mortality and planning their estates, thinking about those future steps. Even I have been thinking a little bit about that myself. So what we're trying to do with this presentation is offer practical tips on creating and maintaining a digital legacy. And really in our philosophy here with the Daniel Boone Regional Library is that we want this to be a DIY approach, a do-it-yourself approach. There are a lot of companies out there, for-hire companies that will do these estate planning for you, and they're very expensive. A lot of times there are a lot of legal loopholes that you'll have to go through. So I think what we can offer you is a really practical approach. One of the other things I'd like to talk about is a book called Your Digital Afterlife by Evan Carroll. This has been an invaluable guide for people over the last decade. And there's a connected website. It's www.yourdigitalafterlife.com/resources. It's a good resource page related to the book. You have the book in the library. We're also at the end of the presentation, we're going to talk about quite a few of the resources you can use either through our library or some good websites that you can find as well. So we'll show you those links. Finally, I do want to make the caveat that I can't neither Katie and I can provide legal assistance or advice through this program. What we're trying to do is just point you toward legal resources that might be really useful in the future in planning this. So legal advice would definitely need to go to an estate planning attorney or a law librarian or something like that. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen and we'll do a short presentation. As I said before, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to ask them during chat. We'll also be talking about some of the links that we're showing during the presentation as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so why you should plan ahead. So in this information age, our digital lives are very pervasive. Much of this data is valuable, whether to loved ones or mischievous actors. Like your finances and physical belongings, you should set intentions now for the management of this content once you've passed away. So, while passing on your digital legacy to others is important, equally important is making sure you have a trusted heir to dispose of these assets correctly, if indeed that is what you would like to do. Digital media and social media platforms are part of the fabric of 21st century life and are now an indelible footprint of our life on Earth. For instance, TikTok is downloaded more than any other app. You send over 12 million texts per day, watch 4 million videos, post 49,000 photographs on Instagram. Is a part of the fabric of our life and our footprint on Earth is this digital media. So, what many people remember about others include both real world interactions along with other interactions across many different social media and digital platforms. And for many relationships, particularly now in the time of the pandemic, social media is the sole way of keeping in contact and up to date with each other's lives. And while preserving the past by preserving social media accounts may not be a preferred way of memorializing someone, we can make clear what we want to do with our accounts well before our deaths if we decide to preserve some kind of digital legacy. So, right now, I'd like to talk a little bit about personal archiving, as that is a part of my background here at the library. And I also came to the library from an archiving background. So, personal archiving is the process behind digitizing important photographs, documents, and other ephemera. Digitizing is part of a process of personal archiving and is great use for those that are actually inheriting your assets. So, what we recommend, and this is in a nutshell here, um, to curate and then scan documents, photographs, letters, and other important items so that they will be more easily transferred digitally from one family member to another. Scanners are very inexpensive these days, and some scanning can be done using free software like Google PhotoScan on your smartphone. At one point, the library could assist with scanning needs. We don't do that right now because of the pandemic, but we're hoping that we can start that up again soon once the pandemic subsides. You can also digitize with commercial services such as Media Preserve and Legacy Box. You might have seen a Legacy Box ad on television. Basically, you can put in your old media, whether that be 35 millimeter film or some older like reel to reel film is another example of what they would do, what they would digitize. So obscure formats would send them off to be digitized. These are just some of the places where you could do that. Walgreens is another great example of a place that's local that does digitization services, as well as Walmart too. So after digitizing these items, it is recommended that you make copies and store them safely. You can do that with a portable hard drive, in the cloud. Google Photos, Google Drive, and iCloud are all options for preserving them digitally. So probably the first step in getting a really good digital legacy program and plan going is inventorying your digital assets. Your digital estate will not make much sense to others if you don't have a good inventory of what you have and where it is kept. So Your estate can include the following: computer files, including photos, audio, and Word documents, online banking and e-commerce, which includes both conventional banking and eBay, PayPal and Etsy, email, whether it be social media, including the ubiquitous Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts. But this also includes specialized social media, such as LinkedIn for professionals and Ravelry for knitters. Um, Finally, storage devices, which are tangentially related to computer files because many files and photos are backed up on these devices. These include portable hard drives, cloud storage such as Google Photos and Google Drive, as well as flash drives. Some other assets to consider are auto-pay bills and online subscriptions like Netflix or health portals where medical labs and health data are published, as well as accounts unique to your hobbies and online life. So computer files is one of the first places you should go to figure out what you would like to include in your digital legacy and also in your inventory. So what photos, documents, or audio and video files do you have in storage? Is the storage local or external? And how do you want these assets to be handled and distributed? You want to clearly delineate what you would like to do with these files in your inventory instructions. Many people want personal computer files deleted upon death, but for instance, they want to have their digital photos shared with family. Also, making sure that files are organized in a rational way is another important factor. So digital storage is really only as good as how well it is organized. So this is an example of a horribly organized and confusing directory roadmap that leads to some buried video files of my daughter from 2007. Really, before I embarked in teaching our personal archiving class, this is a very common sight for many of my hard drives. Folders and files were buried under mountains of subdirectories, and many were lost in the case of precious files like these. You want to think, what do you have and where it is stored? So here's a word about top-level directories. You can see here in the folder photos is a top-level directory, or what's also called a root directory. So I recommend, for the purposes of ease of use and findability, you should have no more than 2 subdirectories embedded under a root folder, unlike this version, which had 6 and was incredibly confusing and hard to find the actual folder that I was looking for, which was the 2007 videos. Eliminate the clutter for those who are inheriting your assets. These subdirectories also make no sense and have no clear path to the 2007 videos, as they are initially under a folder called Photos. Another example is this flash drive right here. This is a great example of a complete organizational mess. Um, Nothing is in folders. Uh, these are all different types of files, from TIFF files to PDFs to JPEGs. Um, so you want to make your basically what we recommend is making sure that you have files that make sense to people, um, and also are in places that are readily accessible. So while you're inventorying, it is a good idea to organize. So this is a screen grab of, I think it's an HP Simple Save portable hard drive that I have. Um, it's used as backup storage for most of my family's photos and documents. And so I just have 6 top level folders in this hard drive, no extraneous files that are cluttering the immediate directory. And one can clearly see that there are 6 main folders. For instance, my Facebook backup files, This was after I deleted my Facebook account, um, something called restored files from an old laptop, old photos, which could honestly be a little bit, I think, a little bit better labeled, and then the HP Simple Save application as well. Perhaps the most confusing thing in our modern digital age is clutter. Options for a cluttered hard drive or laptop that one inherits are actually quite limited. And with no clear file organization, one is apt to completely scrub the device with a factory reset and not retain anything. So to reiterate, archivists recommend storing digitized items in the cloud and in more permanent storage mechanisms, such as a portable hard drive. Portable hard drives are a highly recommended storage mechanism in my book. They're safe, easily stored, and usually very difficult to corrupt. So we do store a lot of our precious items now in the cloud. A great example for place I store most of my family's photos is Google Photos, and I know it's heavily used by a lot of people these days. Um, we have, as a family, have thousands of photos in Google Photos. So you want to make sure that your heirs have access to these files um, as part of creating a digital legacy. And you have to ask these questions about either of these formats. What do you want to keep? What's best left to the digital graveyard? Does your heir know how to access this cloud account? And that would be dependent on your the executor of your digital estate. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Um, so make sure you list in your digital assets, you've listed the storage that's in the cloud as well. So next we'll move on to other types of digital assets. So one of the most important assets to ensure you leave a trail to is your email. It serves as a master key of sorts. Many online accounts are connected to an email address for signing in or setting receipts or account confirmations. It can therefore serve as a backdoor into accounts for which your executor lacks the password and needs to reset. So questions you should ask yourself include, what kind of email or emails do I have? Where is its content stored? Um, is it via your internet service provider or through the internet? So if you lose access, and once data service is ended with an ISP, is content archived? Do you want some or all of your communications shared or deleted? And finally, does it require two-factor authentication for signing in, which is increasingly common? And so these are all details to be addressed in your digital inventory. So probably still the most frequently used social media is Facebook. They're a corporate entity that has shaped and changed the world in many, many ways. Um, and so most people in the US, if they're going to have a social media account, I think the default still is Facebook in a lot of ways, especially for older generations. So with Facebook, your options are to memorialize your timeline or deactivate your account. So to memorialize, Facebook requires you to proactively register a legacy content with them who will handle the account. So I'm going to actually click on this legacy contact link here, and we'll show you what that looks like. So what is a legacy contact and what can they do with my Facebook account? This is some information from Facebook right here, talking a little bit about what a legacy contact does and can't do with your Facebook account. So this person can make a pinned post on your timeline And friends can leave messages and share memories on this memorialized page. At the end of this presentation, we'll talk a little bit about a memorialized page for a relative of mine. Facebook's legacy contact counts as an online tool under the RUFA DAA. That is, it's actually, so this is something that we'll talk a little bit about. Some federal legislation that was passed down. Instead of naming this acronym, I'm going to call it RUFADA, which is appropriate. I think it's so it, they actually under RUFADA they have the right to handle your account and cannot be guilty of hacking. For the sake of privacy, this legacy contact won't have full access to your accounts. So, for example, they cannot read your Facebook messages. Um, with your username and password, your executor can also deactivate the account. Excuse me. At this point, I also want to talk a little bit about blogs. Take a sip of water here, real quick. Um, so, blogs are something that are very common as well, almost as common as Facebook in some ways. And questions to ask yourself about legacy planning for a blog is whether you pay for the domain or use free hosts like WordPress. Is the content archived? And do you want to remain accessible? Want it to remain accessible once you're gone? So I'll talk a little bit about social media here. Um, Twitter is another heavily used social media account. And one of the really interesting things about Twitter is that archiving content is a way that you can preserve your intellectual property shared on the site. So this is managed in your settings and downloaded. Um, there's a lot of great information in the Twitter um, account settings about downloading your Twitter archive. To deactivate, you will need the email and password for your account. So Instagram, same thing. You can archive and download your content so you have a file saved to your Instagram post. And this can be managed from your settings. It's very similar in the sense that you can download most of your content. The thing that I found when I downloaded all my Facebook content, I deleted my Facebook account 2 years ago, and a lot of it is you're going to get a huge, basically you're going to get a huge file that has a lot of subdirectories, and you're going to see a lot of gibberish. But in there, you're also going to be able to find all your photos, your posts, things like that. That's very similar to what you would do with your Instagram. So last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about online banking and e-commerce. Um, this is probably the most important aspect of preserving your digital legacy in a lot of ways because it does deal with your financial matters. So, for instance, what should one do with auto pay billing, um, recurring payments for subscriptions, or accounts that remember your credit card, like your PayPal and eBay account? So, just recently, a company called Vault 12 launched a digital inheritance site that it's an app basically. It would assist you in passing your digital assets to the next generation. In exploring this site, I found it very unwieldy and really quite expensive. And one of the things I really want to avoid as someone recommending these sites as a librarian, is anything that costs the patron a lot of money. We don't really want to recommend any of the companies out there because I think anybody can do most of this on their own. So be very skeptical of these services. Sorry, they can be unbelievably expensive and have many legal loopholes for the users. You can make plans for digital finances managed by yourself. The next couple of slides will show you how. So step one, contact your bank. Make sure that your bank knows who will be the executor of your finances in your digital estate. So you can do that through almost any bank. They have estate planning professionals there. Um, Talk to them and make sure they know who is receiving your trust and the funds from your estate. However, there are two distinct differences between digital executors and the people who will actually be receiving your finances, financial assets. So there's someone that you will probably want to talk to well in advance who will be your digital legacy executor. There is another person who will be the beneficiary of your financial estate. I really apologize for this. I'm kind of losing my voice. I'm going to take another drink of water. Just a second here. Okay. Um, so they are two different people. So making very clear plans and instructions for your executor in the case of your online financial matters will be of significant benefit to your heirs. So in essence, your will or trust will be the place where all the elements of your finances will be distributed. However, during probate, your executor will need to access these accounts to pay bills and wrap up your estate. So consider whether you need to leave instructions about accessing online accounts for your checking or savings account, your retirement accounts, your mortgage, life insurance, and gas and electric or phone or cable bills. So now that you understand the scope of digital assets, you'll want to organize this information so you and your digital executor know what you have and what your intentions are, and how to access or log into these various assets. So this is an example of what a handwritten digital inventory looks like. You can also create a digital inventory using a simple spreadsheet in Google Sheets or Excel. Regardless, this template of columns is useful because it lays out all the necessary details like passwords and your instructions for each account. You want to make sure that this information is clear, concise, and curated in it, and that is an important step toward making sure your assets are properly handled. One of the nice things about having your inventory in a spreadsheet format is that it can be edited and there is no confusion regarding mislabeling or poor handwriting. And as you can see, this is a sample digital inventory that I put together. Um, so you want to make sure that it's clear to yourself and to the person that you might be turning your assets over to. Um, I like to use clear columns, and as you can see here, both email and other social media accounts, as well as laptops. Any of my storage mechanisms are listed here. So you should include all the inventory should include everything that you have that you want to pass on. And it leaves, leave very clear instructions for what you would like to do with it. Yeah, so leaving clear instructions is very important. You want to leave clear instructions on where this inventory is stored and how to access it, whether that's on a computer, a password managing software, or a hard copy. If the inventory is stored on a device that is password protected, share these login credentials with your executor or personal representative. List passwords in your inventory, not your will, which is a public document. Passwords change all the time, so update the inventory regularly. A hard copy in a safe deposit box may not be the most efficient solution. So instructions in your estate planning document should match or reflect the instructions in your inventory. Making it legal. This is also a really important step. And I want to also say that we are discussing some of the laws pertaining to digital estate planning. Um, we're just pointing to resources out there. We aren't able to provide any legal advice. So in 2018, Missouri passed a version of RUFADA, which I talked about before, which designates representatives or digital executors access to a deceased user's digital assets. You need estate documents like a will or trust for RUFADA to apply to your digital assets. This law gives your digital executor the right to handle your affairs if you name them in your estate documents. So before this legislation, one could technically be considered guilty of hacking into a deceased user's account because many terms of service agreements make accounts non-transferable. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a tragic story near the end of this presentation that happened to my family. And before RUFADA was passed, it was very difficult to even memorialize someone's page. Accessing these accounts was extremely hard. So although online tools provided by digital companies take precedence in designated access, there aren't many of these tools available. The most relevant online tools are Facebook's Legacy Contact and Google's Inactive Account Manager. So naming your digital executive. So this is the person you appoint, ideally in your estate planning documents, to handle your digital affairs on your behalf. This person should be experienced using technology. And again, I want to point out, this may not be the person who is receiving your estate. It might be something, but it could be as well. It just depends. So you should provide language in your will or other estate planning documents that, one, names the digital executor to handle your digital affairs, and two, instructs that individual on what to preserve or delete. Direct them to your digital inventory. Actions they can take on your behalf include deactivating accounts and subscriptions, archiving accounts, notifying email correspondence of the original user's passing, sharing your digital photo library with other friends and family, memorializing your Facebook page. And another mention that as far as estate planning documents, um, we aren't able to recommend the exact type that you need to use. There are lots of law librarians and estate planning agents and attorneys who are trained in the legal aspects of digital estate planning that can assist with this. So what happens if you did not curate your digital legacy? I'm going to talk about a couple of sad and in some cases bizarre stories that occurred when people have not curated their digital legacy. So in the 21st century, um, it would be a mistake to make estate planning without thinking of some kind of digital estate planning as well. If you don't do this, you're presented with a very tricky probate process. So here's a really good example, and this is a really pretty strange story. Um, it was recounted in the New Yorker, I believe, a couple of years ago. Um, so Thomas Hostler was a very influential Republican political operative. So without an explicit plan for her father's digital assets upon his death, the estranged daughter of Thomas Hostler published his professional correspondence regarding voter suppression and gerrymandering. While the information she shared was in many ways valuable to public discourse, her absence caused a media storm. It tarnished her father's reputation and has embroiled her in protracted lawsuits. Lesson learned: you may not like how your heirs handle your digital affairs. An actionable plan set out in your estate planning documents helps avoid that. Then I'm going to talk about a much more personal story. So Scott Johnson was my brother-in-law. He passed away tragically in November of 2014 under very mysterious circumstances. Because he worked in IT and had large numbers of laptops, devices, social media accounts, and other digital media, sifting through his digital estate was messy, complicated, and many ends were left untied because he was divorced and had named no executor for his digital estate. We could not gain access to most of his accounts. The social media accounts that we could access was a very tricky process that involved my wife having to send in proof of relationship to him, as well as proof of his passing. This was before Rufata and was especially tricky with his Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter accounts. All his laptops were rendered unusable because they were heavily protected and no one had access aside from Scott. He actually worked in internet security. So most of his photos and computers and computer hard drives are completely inaccessible. So after months of back and forth wrangling with Facebook, we finally were able to establish a memorial page for him. And you can actually see that the memorial page right here. Most of the photos on his hard drives remain inaccessible, and the laptops were disposed of without gathering any of his valuable documents or photos. If he had a digital inventory, we would have been saved from most of these troubles. Okay, so that's the presentation, and one of the things we'd like to talk a little bit about are the resources. So first, I'd like to talk about this fantastic resource called Everplans. Um, this is basically a free website that you can go to, and let me actually click on it here so people can see. Talks a little bit about closing accounts and services when someone dies, um, as well as step-by-step instructions. But it also lists all these different companies and how you would go about um, canceling or naming what you would like to do with these accounts with your digital executor. So I think there are over 230 popular services and how to cancel each and every one of them. I think they're also following Rufata laws as well here. So you can, this is an extremely, extremely useful website. Another one is your Digital Afterlife website. This is the book I mentioned at the very beginning of the program. Um, they have some really great inventory templates here. You can open these in Excel or Google Docs. Um, Also, there's an appendix. It is changing. Digital legacy and planning is changing all the time. Excuse me. So this has talked a little bit about the current landscape. Also, here's some information about Rufata and the laws that were passed down related to that. Um, it talks a bit about the legislation and different states that this was enacted in, as well as some of the more the small print regarding the law itself. And finally, I do want to make a push for this personal archiving website. This is through the Library of Congress. It's a really good way to get started with a personal archiving project. And I think there's lots to be said for this being part of your digital legacy plan as well, because the newer generations, um, not only will they not have the possibly have the resources to make this the digitization, most of the formats are becoming obsolete. So passing on digital files is a really, really great idea. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Katie. And I wanted to thank everybody for coming to this presentation. My apologies about um, my voice fading here. I'm not sure what's going on. I think it's allergy time for me for sure. But I hope you learned something from this. And Katie's going to talk a little bit about some of the final housekeeping um, with this program. We are going to offer. We're hopefully going to offer a lot more of these webinars in the future. We're just getting started with online programming, and it's taken the place of it's really taken the place of in-person programming here. It's been a long slog for us, big dry spell as far as programming goes. So we're just getting started with this. So yeah, Katie, if you want to fill people in on some of the um, final components of this, but thanks so much for attending, everybody.
Right. I just want to also say thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. I attached our emails in the chat. If you have any further questions or would like the links from our resource page or really any more information about the things we discussed tonight, feel free to email us. You can also call the library and they'll get your question to us. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook and look for more events like this on our website, which is www.dbrl.org. Also, there will be a survey available after we close the webinar, and we'd appreciate your feedback on it. So have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.